Priory of the Sacred Flame is one of the returning dungeons we'll be facing in Season 3 of The War Within. The dungeon starts with a 30-minute timer, so as long as you complete the dungeon within that time frame, you will upgrade your key. As you start off this dungeon, you'll encounter a variety of different deadly mobs, including 3 mini-bosses that upon death will draw out one of the guards surrounding the first boss, in turn removing a stack of the boss's strength and numbers buff, which increases the boss's damage by 200% for each present guard. These guards will also have their health increased by 1000% when near Captain Dailcry, the first boss, so it's essential we face them separately. Before we're able to take on these mini-bosses though, we'll first face Arathi footmen that will cast Defend upon reaching 50% health. This reduces all their allies' damage taken by 50% for up to 5 seconds, but disturbing this channel will increase the footman's damage taken by 25%, so you'll want to use stops like stuns or hard crowd control to stop this channel ASAP. Tanks, you'll also want to be constantly moving the surrounding mobs out of the small area of effect of this channel. Arathi Knights are one of your priority kill mobs as they will cast Disrupting Shout, dealing AoE physical damage to your party and also interrupting any spell casting upon completion, so casters should keep an eye out for this cast and make sure that they're not casting when it finishes. This does hit quite hard, so I'd also recommend using a defensive for it. Knights will also bleed random party members with Impale for 12 seconds. You'll also want to use a defensive if targeted by this ability. Fervent Sharpshooters will leap near players and drop caltrops that all players must avoid. Any targets caught will be rooted to the ground and suffer a bleed. Sharpshooters will also shoot the tank and potshot random party members, so use a defensive if you're targeted by multiple or when you're low. Here you'll also find the first mini-boss that you'll want to focus down, Guard Captain Suleiman. He'll shield slam the tank for tremendous physical damage while also knocking the tank back, so mitigate this and try to keep your back against a wall. Suleiman will also thunderclap, dealing party-wide damage to anyone within 50 yards and reducing their movement speed by 50% for 6 seconds, so use defensives if you're low when you see this going off. After defeating Suleiman, Sergeant Chainmail will head over to your location to fight. Chainmail will leap to a random player with Lunging Strike, dealing huge upfront physical damage to all players within 5 yards and bleeding them for 18 seconds. Make sure you're spread when fighting this mob and use a defensive if you're struck. She will also cast Brutal Smash, marking a swirly around her that all players must move out from, otherwise you'll likely get one-shot. While fighting Chainmail, you might want to pull her with extra trash that might include some priority kick mobs. Fanatical Conjurers will cast fireballs at random players, interrupt this to avoid taking large damage. They also target the ground with Flame Strike, which all players must sidestep to avoid taking heavy fire damage. Devout Priest will cast Greater Heal once their allies get low. This must be interrupted to prevent a 50% heal going off. They also have a lower priority kick in Holy Smite that deals moderate damage to a random player, so you can send any spare kicks into this. We can now choose which mini-boss we want to head to next, but for the sake of this guide we'll head up the left stairs towards High Priest Amia. Here we'll find war lynxes that you can skip as they patrol, but if pulled they will pounce on random players, dealing high upfront physical damage and leaving a nasty 14-second bleed that is removed once the player is fully healed. Use a defensive and any self-healing you have when affected, and healers need to spot heal this player. Now we can take on High Priest Amia. Players will need to keep an eye out for her reflective shield. This shield absorbs massive amounts of damage and reflects 70% of the incoming damage back on attackers as holy damage, so make sure you use defensives while this shield is active so that you don't one-shot yourself. She will also cast Holy Smite much like the priest we fought earlier, so make sure to kick this ability. After taking out Amia, Tainted Jewelmal will be drawn out. He will spam cast Fireball on random players which you'll want to interrupt. Finally, Jewelmal will cast Emberstorm, painting the ground in fire swirlies that your whole group will need to avoid. If instead you chose to head right up the stairs at the start, you'll need to fight Forgemaster Damien. He'll buff himself with Seal of Flame, increasing his damage done by 50% and causing extra fire damage on all of his attacks, but this will also create several Molten Pool swirlies nearby that players must dodge. Players will then want to use a defensive when Damien casts Heatwave. This inflicts massive fire damage to the whole group and leaves a horrible 8-second fire dot. If you kill Damien as your second mini-boss, then Elena Emberlance will head over. He will channel an unavoidable Holy Radiance, inflicting massive party-wide damage over the 8-second channel, so players will need to use a defensive for this ability and healers will need to out-heal the huge incoming damage. Elena will also cast a Divine Judgment on the tank, dealing large upfront holy damage and increasing the tank's damage taken by 25% for 6 seconds. Healers be quick to dispel this and tanks be ready to use defensives. Depending on which mini-boss you took out last will depend on which of the guards you face with the boss. Their mechanics are the same as we've already talked about, but you'll need to deal with them at the same time as taking on Captain Dailcry. His old Hull Spear has now been replaced with Earth Shattering Spear, marking a swirly under a player's location that everyone must dodge to avoid being one-shot, but the impact of the spear will deal large party-wide damage, so healers just make sure that everyone is topped, and once the spear is landed, it will leave a zone that all players need to stay clear of. Players will then need to interrupt his Dailcry cast. This cast will increase the attack and casting speed of all nearby mobs by 25% for 12 seconds, so if it does go through and you have caster guards active, be very ready to kick. Dailcry will occasionally leap to a random player with Savage Mauling, immobilizing them and inflicting substantial damage every 0.5 seconds. During this time, Dailcry shields himself, which needs to be broken by damage to interrupt this effect. The player receiving the Mauling should use a defensive. Tanks will also need to use a defensive when the boss uses its Pierce Armor attack. This inflicts high upfront physical damage and leaves a disgusting 10-second bleed that needs to be mitigated. After taking out the first boss, we'll take on some new mobs before the second boss. You'll want to be careful with how many Ardent Paladins you pull at a time due to their Sacred Toll ability. This ability inflicts enormous party-wide damage, so make sure to commit a defensive for it, and healers be sure to heal this back up quickly. They will also cast Consecration, marking a swirly on the floor that will burn anyone stood within it for heavy ticking damage, so tanks should continuously kite away from these puddles to make dodging them easier. Zealous Templars will be a problem for your tank due to their self buffs that increase their melee attack damage, so tanks be ready with mitigation when fighting these. Baron Braunpyke is the second boss of this instance. He will place 3 swirlies on the floor with Hammer of Purity that explode into hammers that spiral outwards. Anyone caught in their path will suffer fatal damage, so make sure to avoid them. The best way to do this is by stacking on one side of the encounter, and as soon as the swirlies spawn, your whole group runs to the other side and back and forth. Players must interrupt Baron's Burning Light. A successful cast will deal lethal group-wide damage and apply a nasty dot, while also healing Baron for 40% of his health. Throughout the fight, the boss will spawn a sacrificial pyre around the encounter that players need to repeatedly soak until it disappears. Soaking will leave a nasty sacrificial flame dot on that player for 5 seconds that stacks, so players should only soak once and use a defensive for the debuff. You will, however, want to wait to soak here until after Braunpyke throws a Castigator's Shield at several players to avoid dying to this overlap, as this deals large upfront holy damage, slows players, and also spawns a Castigator's Detonation Swirly that all players need to run out from. Finally, upon reaching 100 energy, the boss will cast Vindictive Wrath, increasing his physical damage by 25% and empowering his abilities. During this time, the pyre will need to be soaked 5 times, he will spawn 5 hammers, throw a shield at your whole group, and also cast Burning Light quicker, so be prepared. After taking down Baron, we'll head to the last boss, but we'll need to tackle some new mobs first. Risen Mages must be interrupted on their Fireball cast, but more importantly on their Fireball volley. This cast deals lethal fire damage to everyone within 50 yards. Light Spawns will channel Purification on a random player, dealing very high holy damage over the 6-second channel. You must use the defensive when targeted by this cast, and healers again be ready to spot heal. Once the light spawn gets low, it will then cast Burst of Light, inflicting huge damage to players caught, but also healing any mobs caught in the 10-yard radius. Tanks should preemptively move the remaining mobs outside of the circle, but this is obviously easier said than done with casters, so you will need to kick them out or use displacement effects. Sir Braunpyke is the last mini-boss we'll fight in this dungeon. Tanks will need to be wary of his Blazing Strike. This deals high holy damage and leaves a horrible 10-second holy dot, so use mitigation here. And the mini-boss will also constantly pulse AoE damage with Radiant Flame, so all players should be prepared with defensives, and healers will need to commit healing cooldowns here. The last mobs in this area are the Risen Footmen. These mobs just melee the tank, but upon dying will explode for big group-wide damage, so make sure to stagger their deaths or use defensive. Finally, we can take on the last boss of the dungeon, Prioress Murrpray. During this fight, you'll want to interrupt as many Holy Smites as possible. This cast deals decent damage to the tank. Murrpray will also cast Holy Flame, marking a swirly on the ground that all players must avoid. If you're targeted by the boss's Sacred Flame, you'll want to kite the rays so that you don't get caught in the sanctified ground that it leaves behind, but be careful not to paint the whole platform in fire. Murrpray will then cast Blinding Light occasionally. This deals massive damage to players and disorients them if they are not facing away from the boss, so simply turn your back towards the end of the cast. Throughout the whole fight, the boss will periodically buff herself with Inner Fire, increasing her holy damage dealt by 50% for 10 seconds, and while this buff lasts, she will constantly pulse AoE damage to the group, so healers be prepared to out-heal this. Upon reaching 50% health, the boss will teleport up to the top platform and cast Barrier of Light, placing an enormous Absorb Shield on herself that provides immunity to kicks. Players will need to chase the boss up and break this Absorb Shield as fast as possible to interrupt her Embrace the Light channel, which repeatedly pulses high ramping damage to the whole group, So commit defensives here and take out the shield quickly. During this time, adds will arrive from downstairs that will suffer ticking damage from the boss, so you'll want to crowd control them and burst them down before they reach your party and melee your team to death. These adds do not have an aggro table, so use crowd control to avoid being attacked. But that's it for this boss, and that wraps up Priory of the Sacred Flame for Mythic Plus in Season 3. If you're interested in my nameplates, they are from my free plates profile, which can be found inside my Discord. The link will be in the description. And if this guide did help you or a friend out, then please feel free to drop a like down below, subscribe to your boy, and until next time, I'll catch you guys later.